We've talked quite a little bit about Scrum here and there throughout this course, but let's now bring it all together in this video. And what we know so far is that Scrum is an iteration-based agile framework, and the iterations are known as sprints. So those sprints are the time-boxed cycles of work, each of which should produce a working product increment. So that's kind of what we know so far. And the official guidance on the detail of Scrum can be found in the Scrum Guide. So if you are interested in a bit of bedtime reading, then take yourself to scrumguides.org and you can either read it online or download it as a PDF, and you can see it's available in a number of different languages here. But it is a very readable document, and I do urge you, if you're interested, to take a look at this. It shouldn't take you too long to scan it. However, I'm not going to say that that's a definite requirement for your exam preparation, because I am going to give you the edited highlights. But if you want to see a little bit more nuance and a bit more detail, then by all means take a look at this. So for the rest of this video, I'd like to take you through the components of the Scrum team, what the Scrum events are, and what the Scrum artifacts are. And we shall begin with the Scrum team. And you can see the different roles just here, but as a team, all of these people together, they are collectively responsible for all product-related activities, including the production of that working product increment at the end of each sprint. And as I think we've mentioned at some point before, the Scrum team are empowered to manage their own work. So we described that previously as the Scrum team being self-organising or self-managing. And that's a very strong characteristic of these types of agile teams. So let's go through these three different roles just here: product owner, developers, and Scrum Master. And we shall start with the product owner. And she, well, I say she because my graphic is of a lady here, but she is kind of representing the business side of the product. So she is accountable for maximising the value of the product. She's got her business head on when she's making decisions. We know that she is responsible for the product backlog and prioritising stories on the product backlog according to the value that they bring to the business. And she has full authority from the organisation to make decisions about the product. She's in charge of the business value. And importantly, note that the product owner role is only one person. It is not a committee. And that's actually really important, because we need it to be just one person, because making decisions by committee takes an awful long time. Whereas if it's just one person that does have that full authority to determine what gets worked on next in our product, then that's going to make for much quicker decisions and much quicker responses to any changes. The other role in our team will be that of developers. And the developers are few in number. I'm not entirely sure that that makes sense, but the point I'm trying to make here is that we need to make sure that while we have enough people, enough developers in order to be able to have all the skills we need to complete the iteration, we don't want to have too many, because then we start having sub-teams emerging and people not being quite as committed to each other. So generally, the overall Scrum team should be less than 10. So that's going to include, 6, 7 or 8 developers, something like that. And as I said, the team is cross-functional, which means that we do have all the skills within the team that we need to complete the iteration, so that we're not reliant on people outside of the team. As we've said, the developers are self-managing or self-organising, so nobody tells them what to do, nobody micromanages, there are no sub-teams or hierarchies, and they are responsible for creating that sprint backlog, which is that list of work that the team is going to undertake during the sprint. And they hold each other accountable, not only for quality of work and for professionalism, but also for commitment to actually getting a working piece of software, a working increment at the end of the sprint. And then bringing everything together is the Scrum Master. And the Scrum Master, as the name suggests, is a very indicative role of the Scrum framework. And this is, I think, a really interesting role, because this role is somebody who is responsible for establishing and enforcing, if you like, Scrum practices throughout the organisation. So therefore, they're going to be leading and training and coaching Scrum adoption to make sure that people do follow the framework. And they also work in very much a servant leader type of leadership style, in that they are very much focused on providing a good environment for the team to be able to get the work done. So they'll be looking at removing impediments and removing obstacles and making sure that the team can produce their best work. And interestingly, the Scrum Master should not be the same person as the product owner. And the reason for that is that the Scrum Master can kind of act as a bit like a referee, in that if the product owner tries to kind of be a bit maverick and tries to squeeze more work out of the team than is practical, or tries to break the rules of Scrum, then the Scrum Master can step in and put us all back on track with the correct guidelines that actually work for Scrum. So there could be a conflict of interest if we have the same person playing the role of Scrum Master as product owner. So the Scrum Master might be the project manager, but I have to say the Scrum framework itself does not define a role of project manager. The reason why I mention this at all is that you can imagine there might be a scenario in the exam where it's talking to you as if you are a project manager, but you may well be fulfilling the role of Scrum Master in terms of establishing Scrum practices throughout the organisation and providing a good environment for the team to do their best work. So those are the roles that we see in the Scrum team. Next on our list, though, is to look at the Scrum events, of which there are 5. Now, when I say Scrum events, we're also including meetings in this term events. So there are 5, but can you guess what they might be? And I'm imagining if you did pause for a second and guess, you might well have come up with some of these meetings here. So the planning meeting, the daily stand-up, the review and the retrospective. So those meetings are absolutely some of these Scrum events that will be officially defined in the Scrum Guide. But it's the 5th one that sometimes people forget, and that is the sprint itself. So I think that's why we define these as Scrum events rather than just meetings, because I don't think you could call the sprint a meeting, but it is certainly an event. So all of these would be defined as the 5 Scrum events. And in fact, if we look at our agile life cycle that we've seen once or twice already, and let's just remove the vision and the roadmap and the release planning, because those are not defined in Scrum, and therefore rename some of these things to the Scrum names. So sprint planning, the daily Scrum, which is the stand-up, the sprint review, the sprint retrospective, and the overall sprint itself make up those 5 Scrum events. And it's the Scrum Master that ensures that we do have these meetings, that we do stay in the time boxes put aside, that we do make sure that we come up with a plan for improvement when we have our sprint retrospective where we analyse how we can improve for the next sprint. And then lastly, let's take a look at our Scrum artifacts. And you already know that the product backlog is going to be an artifact. That's a really important artifact, as we know, in any agile environment. But note that in the Scrum Guide, it only defines 3 key artifacts, because we've talked about agile artifacts on a different occasion, and we know that there are all sorts of things we could put on the list, but the Scrum Guide only lists 3, one of which is the product backlog, of course. So the other 2, what do you reckon? Well, one of them is the sprint backlog, which, as we said, is the team's work for the sprint. So they produce that sprint backlog during the sprint planning meeting. And then the third one, can you guess? Well, it's going to be that working product increment that we produce at the end of the sprint. Let's wrap up then with your key takeaways. So the Scrum team, who are collectively responsible for the product, comprises the product owner, the developers and the Scrum Master. The Scrum events, of which there are 5, include those 4 meetings, plus the sprint itself. And then the 3 key Scrum artifacts are the product backlog, the sprint backlog, and the working product increment. Thanks for watching. Subscribe here to get the latest from CBT Nuggets. Oh, and also, if you're new to IT or are interested in an IT career, visit cbtnuggets.com and sign up for a free, yes, free, a free trial.